A chance encounter in Tokyo. As I paced back and forth in my Tokyo apartment, my nerves were getting the better of me. I had a few hours to kill before meeting Taro, the person I had been chatting with online for months. We had hit it off immediately, bonding over our shared love of Japanese culture and language. But what if our chemistry didn't translate to real life? Taro messaged me, asking for a photo, and I couldn't help but feel a flutter in my chest. I had sent him pictures before, and he seemed to like how I looked, but I was still anxious about meeting in person. I told him I'd send one soon, but what I really meant was new, that untranslatable Afrikaans word that could mean anything from immediately to never. 15 minutes later, Taro messaged again, his impatience evident in the multiple exclamation points. I apologized, saying I was busy, and he asked what I was up to. I teased him with a winking face, and he seemed to accept that. After finishing my morning routine, I sent him the photo, which he received with enthusiasm. I mentioned I was heading out to the store, and he responded with a dramatic, "You're going where?" I reassured him I had a map and would be fine, but he still cautioned me to be careful and not stray too far from the apartment. I ventured out into the chilly Tokyo morning, taking in the sights and sounds of the bustling city. As I walked along the Sumida River, I snapped photos of the cherry blossoms, feeling a sense of wonder at the beauty around me. Suddenly, I was jostled by a passerby, and an elderly woman scolded me in Japanese. I apologized and continued on my way, eager to share my experience with Taro. When I returned to the apartment, I messaged him, and he joked about the encounter, saying "Welcome to Japan," and warning me about the feisty Obeikan grandmothers in the city. Despite the brief scare, I felt more at ease, knowing that I had taken a step closer to meeting Taro in person. Our online connection had been strong, but I was excited to see if our chemistry would translate to real life. As the hours ticked by, my anticipation grew. I had been looking forward to this moment for what felt like an eternity. Taro and I had been chatting online for months, exchanging stories, laughter, and language lessons. We had formed a deep connection, but I couldn't shake off the feeling that meeting in person would be a different story altogether. I decided to take a walk around the neighborhood to clear my head. The crisp Tokyo air and the vibrant streets of Shibuya helped to calm my nerves. I strolled past the famous Scramble Crossing, taking in the sights and sounds of the bustling city. As I walked, I couldn't help but think about Taro and our upcoming meeting. What if we didn't click in person? What if our online chemistry was just a fluke? I pushed the thoughts aside, focusing on the excitement of finally meeting someone who shared my passions and interests. As I returned to my apartment, I received a message from Taro. "I'm on my way," he exclaimed, accompanied by a string of enthusiastic emojis. My heart skipped a beat as I realized that our meeting was just around the corner. I quickly tidied up the apartment, making sure everything was in order. I took a few deep breaths, trying to calm my nerves. This was it, the moment of truth. The doorbell rang, and I felt a surge of adrenaline. I took a moment to collect myself before opening the door. And there he was, Taro, standing in front of me with a bright smile and sparkling eyes. We exchanged awkward hellos, and I invited him in. As we sat down in the living room, I couldn't help but notice how different he looked in person. His features were more defined, his smile more radiant. We chatted nervously at first, but as the minutes ticked by, our conversation flowed more easily. We talked about everything and nothing, laughing and joking like we had known each other for years. The hours flew by, and before I knew it, the sun had set over Tokyo. As we sat on the couch watching the city lights twinkle to life, I realized that our online connection had translated perfectly to real life. Taro and I had found something special, something that went beyond language barriers and cultural differences. We had found a connection that was genuine, heartfelt, and full of laughter. As we sat there, surrounded by the vibrant energy of Tokyo, I knew that this was just the beginning of an incredible adventure. As I sat on the couch with Taro, feeling like we were finally connecting in person, the doorbell rang again. I got up to answer it, expecting it to be a neighbor or perhaps a delivery. But to my surprise, it was a young woman with piercing green eyes and long curly brown hair. She introduced herself as Yui, Taro's childhood friend from Osaka. Yui's arrival was unexpected, and I could sense a hint of tension in the air. Taro's expression changed, and he seemed taken aback by her sudden appearance. I invited her in, trying to be polite, but I couldn't help feeling a pang of unease. As we sat down in the living room, Yui began to chat with Taro in rapid-fire Japanese, leaving me struggling to keep up. I felt like an outsider, watching the two of them interact with an ease that I couldn't quite grasp. Taro seemed to be caught between his loyalty to me and his old friend, and I sensed a complicated history between them. Yui's presence added a new layer of complexity to our meeting. She was charming and vivacious, but I couldn't shake off the feeling that she was hiding something. As the evening wore on, the conversation turned to Taro's past, and I discovered that he and Yui had been inseparable growing up. They had shared secrets, dreams, and heartbreaks, and it was clear that their bond was still strong. But as the night wore on, I began to notice that Yui was probing Taro about his feelings for me. She asked pointed questions, her eyes sparkling with a mischievous glint. Taro seemed hesitant to respond, and I sensed a deep-seated conflict within him. Suddenly, Yui dropped a bombshell. She had been in love with Taro for years, and she had come to Tokyo to confess her feelings. The room fell silent, and I felt like I was caught in a whirlwind. Taro's eyes darted between Yui and me, and I could see the turmoil brewing inside him. I tried to process the revelation, my mind racing with questions. What did this mean for Taro and me? Was our connection strong enough to withstand this new development? As the tension in the room grew thicker, I realized that our meeting had just become a lot more complicated. The fate of our budding relationship hung in the balance, and I couldn't help but wonder what the future held. As I sat there trying to process the sudden revelation, I felt a mix of emotions. Part of me wanted to retreat and give Taro and Yui some space to sort out their feelings. It was clear that they had a deep history, and I didn't want to intrude on their private moment. But another part of me was curious about the situation. I had invested so much emotional energy into getting to know Taro, and I wasn't ready to give up on our connection just yet. I wanted to see how this would play out, to understand Taro's feelings and intentions. As I weighed my options, I decided to take a deep breath and try to navigate this complicated situation. I didn't want to be a bystander. I wanted to be an active participant in this unfolding drama. "Hey Taro, can we talk about this?" I asked, trying to sound calm and non-confrontational. Taro looked at me, his eyes searching for guidance. Yui, on the other hand, seemed to be waiting for his response, her eyes fixed intently on him. "I think we need to have an honest conversation about what's going on here," I continued. "Yui, I appreciate your honesty, but I also want to understand Taro's feelings. Can we talk about this together?" Yui nodded, a hint of a smile on her face. Taro, however, looked uncertain, his eyes darting between us. "Okay," he said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. "Let's talk." And with that, the three of us embarked on a journey of discovery, navigating the complex web of emotions, desires, and loyalties that had brought us to this moment. It was unclear what the outcome would be, but I was determined to see it through, to understand the intricacies of Taro's heart, and to find out if our connection was strong enough to withstand this unexpected twist. As we delved deeper into the conversation, I realized that this was not just about Taro and Yui's past, but also about my own feelings and desires. I had to confront my own emotions and decide what I wanted from this situation. Did I want to fight for Taro's attention? Or did I want to step aside and let him work through his feelings with Yui? The conversation was intense, with all three of us sharing our thoughts and feelings. Yui spoke about her long-held crush on Taro and how she had come to Tokyo to confess her feelings. Taro shared his own conflicted emotions, torn between his loyalty to Yui and his growing connection with me. As for me, I spoke about my own feelings, about how I had been drawn to Taro's kind and gentle nature, and how I had invested so much emotional energy into our online connection. I confessed that I wasn't sure what the future held, but I wanted to explore the possibility of a relationship with him. The conversation was raw and honest, with all three of us laying our cards on the table. It was clear that this was a complicated situation, with no easy answers. But as we talked, I began to see that this was not just about Taro and Yui, or Taro and me. It was about all three of us, and how our lives had intersected in this unexpected way. As the night wore on, we reached a tentative understanding. Taro needed time to process his feelings, to figure out what he wanted and where his heart lay. Yui, though hurt, seemed to accept that Taro's feelings for her might not be reciprocated. And I was willing to wait and see where this journey would take us. It was a fragile truce, but it was a start. As we parted ways, I couldn't help but feel a sense of hope. Maybe, just maybe, this complicated situation would lead to something beautiful, something that would bring us all closer together.